Well, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year from Jakarta, Indonesia. I'm Pastor Rory Butler, and I'd like to continue this discussion about Hyper-Grace and the Hebraic Roots movement. It's a very simple point I want to make today, but I think it is significant as we're dealing with these issues. One of the things we need to know about both of these issues is their claims are rooted deeply in a spirit of pride and spiritual elitism. In other words, you've got the Hebrew roots coming along and saying, no, we've got it all wrong for 2,000 years. In fact, we as born-again New Testament Gentile believers are supposed to have been keeping the law of Moses all along. Oh, we just somehow missed it for 2,000 years. The apostles missed it. The early church fathers missed it. All the people throughout church history just missed this point. And now these guys coming along and saying, no, this is how we're supposed to do it. We're supposed to be keeping the festivals. God really wants us to be keeping the Sabbath according to the Jewish law and all this. That is just a complete spirit. And it's an unsubmissive spirit. It doesn't submit to church history. It doesn't submit to church doctrines. It doesn't submit to orthodoxy. It pulls away from the mainstream and the flow of all of Christianity for 2,000 years, and it isolates itself and says, no, this is the right way, and this is what God really intended. Brothers and sisters, that's the spirit of a cult. That is nothing other than the spirit of division and a cult. In fact, that's exactly what the Hebraic Roots movement does, is it separates people from their churches. It causes them to look on other believers with suspicion, with a spirit of superiority, as others are inferior and they don't understand this revelation, they don't understand this truth. Brothers and sisters, that is a deception and a lie. So the Hebrew Roots thing, it's built around logic and theorizing. But listen, all those issues have been dealt with in the past. There's no reason to rehash them over. In fact, they dealt with them in the New Testament. Acts chapter 15 dealt a decisive blow to the issue of the Judaizers and trying to get Gentiles to obey the Old Testament laws by saying once and for all, no, the Gentile believers do not need to keep the law of Moses to be saved. And as Peter says, because we are saved by grace, just as they are. But this is the point where the Hebraic Roots gets really tricky, is they will agree with the statement I just made, and they'll say, that's true. We don't need to keep the law of Moses for salvation. Salvation is by grace. However, keeping the law is what God really wants. And that is the point of deception right there. And what I want to make clear is that the law of Moses not only is not required for salvation, but it is not required in any way, shape, or form to please God. The law of Moses is in no way, shape, or form required to be obeyed or kept by New Testament Gentile believers, period. Nor for salvation, nor to please God, nor is it what God asks, expects, or requires in any way, shape, or form. We are under Christ. We are not under Moses. What do we need to do then to please God? We need to keep the laws of Christ. We need to obey the commandments of Christ. Christ has redefined and reinterpreted much of the law of Moses, but we're not under Moses, we're under Christ. And if you want to go back to Moses, then you have another Lord and another Master, because now there's only one Lord and one Christ, and that's Jesus, not Moses. So we don't look to Moses anymore as to how we should please God in the sense of doing things the way Moses taught the people of Israel to do under the Mosaic covenant. We are not under the Mosaic covenant. We're under a new covenant. We're under the covenant with Christ. And in this covenant, we are no longer required to use Moses' law as a means to pleasing God or for salvation or for honoring God in any way, shape, or form. We're under the covenant of grace. We're under the covenant that Jesus Christ has made with us through His blood. Go in and read the early church fathers. You're not being taught to keep the Sabbath according to the law of Moses. You're not being taught you should be circumcised according to the law of Moses. You're not taught that you shouldn't eat pork. You're not taught that you should keep the Jewish festivals. All of that stuff has passed as such, and now we've entered into a new era, the reign of Messiah, the reign of Christ, and all those types and shadows are fulfilled in Him. And so now you've got people coming along and they're adding they want to add the flesh to the spirit, which is the exact issue that was taking place in the book of Galatians. They started out in the spirit and now they want to add the Mosaic laws on top of it. Well, that's exactly the spirit of the Hebraic Roots movement by and large. Now, I'm not talking about people that are studying Jewish history and laws as far as the symbolism and the application to Christianity. That's a totally different matter, and that's fine. And if you like Jewish-style music and all that, there's no problem with that. But we're talking about a doctrine and a theology where people are saying, no, as born-again New Testament believers, we are supposed to keep the law of Moses. That is a sham. It's a deception, and it's been dealt with. And what it is it's pulling away from mainstream Christianity and trying to create its own deal. That's exactly what Islam did. Many hundreds of years ago. They pulled away from Judaism and Christianity, borrowed the ideas, and invented their own new religion. And so it's the same spirit with the Hyper-Grace movement, you know. I've actually heard some of the Hyper-Grace teachers say, we don't reject all of the good that the former preachers have done or whatever, but we only say what they had was a partial knowledge, and now we have a full knowledge. In other words, some of the great preachers, the great evangelists, the great missionaries of the past, they say, yeah, they did a good work, but they were law-based. They were operating in a spirit of works. So they totally belittle them, and they exalt themselves by saying, we have a superior revelation. We have a greater revelation. That is the essence of spiritual elitism, and that is a spirit of deception. It again pulls away from the mainstream of Christianity, from 2,000 years of church history, and say nobody got it except us. The early church fathers didn't get it. Nobody throughout church history got it. They'll say the apostles got it, but they qualify that statement. But they say now we get it, and now we're teaching it. This is a new grace reformation. That's the spirit of deception. It's rooted deeply in a spirit of pride and independence and a division. It divides the body of Christ.